Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. I know that we are a little later than usual, but we just came off the Labor Day holiday here in the United States, and I was also traveling back from a few days seeing friends in California. It was a great trip, got to see so many familiar faces. I intended to put the show out yesterday as usual, but this was a very prep-heavy show, and I just couldn't get it all done in time. And the reason that it was a prep-heavy show is because we are looking at the entire summer box office season, the fact that it was a bit disappointing as far as overall gross, which movies were box office winners, which movies were box office losers, and trust me, this is going to be a long one, so strap in. But before we get to that, let's take a real quick look at the Labor Day box office. This was the Friday through Sunday box office, with Weapons returning to first place after being bumped down for a week. A 32% drop, it made another $10.4 million from Friday through Sunday. In second place, no, that's not a typo, my favorite movie, Jaws, the 50th anniversary re-release, did enough over the weekend to be the second highest grossing film at the box office with $9.6 million. In third place, we had Caught Stealing from director Darren Aronofsky, which brought in $7.8 million. I really wish this movie had done better. If you saw the review I put out last week, I liked this film a lot, and it just did not draw a huge audience into theaters. Actually, when we look at the worst 3-day openings for a movie in 3,500 or more theaters, Caught Stealing is number 7 on that list. It comes in between Ron's Gone Wrong and Marry Me. And if you look at a lot of these movies, most of them are from the early sort of post-pandemic era when theaters were reopening. Cry Macho is the lowest 3-day opening for a movie in 3,500 theaters or more, but that was a day-and-date release on HBO Max. We have the Whitney Houston film, I Want to Dance with Somebody. That was in 2022, and it also was in that weird Christmas window where Christmas fell on a Sunday and we see box office grosses drop a bit. There was the more fun edition of Spider-Man No Way Home. I think that was in conjunction with the first Cinema Day, National Cinema Day, back in September 2022. Book Club The Next Chapter in 2023. The Kid Who Would Be King at number 5 is the first pre-pandemic film on this list at $7.1 million back in 2019. Then we have Ron's Gone Wrong and Caught Stealing. Marry Me at number 8. Expend4bles at number 9. They named it that way, not me. And then another pre-pandemic film, The Nut Job 2, Nutty by Nature, back in August of 2017. That movie opened in 4,000 theaters and only brought in $8.3 million. So not a great debut for Caught Stealing, but it is still in theaters. You have time to check it out, and if you don't catch it in theaters, I would highly recommend that you catch it some other way. Freakier Friday comes in 4th place for the 3-day weekend with $6.7 million, followed by The Roses, debuting in 5th place at $6.2 million. The Fantastic Four First Steps came in 6th place, a 17% drop, just over $5 million. Then we have The Bad Guys 2. Superman still in the top 10, and it actually ties 7 other movies for the second longest run in the top 10 this year. You can see that graphic right there. It's getting very crowded. Minecraft movie, Superman, and a bunch of others there with 8 weeks in the top 10. Sinners and Lilo and Stitch right now are tied for first. If Superman can stick around for one more week, it will tie those 2 films for the longest run in the top 10 for a movie released in 2025. Nobody 2 comes in 9th place with $1.89 million, and The Naked Gun comes in 10th place at $1.82 million. When we look at the 4-day numbers, Weapons brought in a little over $13 million. Jaws comes in at $11.3 million. Caught Stealing comes in at $9.5 million. Freakier Friday comes in at $8.7 million. The Roses comes in at $7.7 million. The Fantastic Four First Steps comes in at $6.5 million. The Bad Guys 2 comes in at $6.3 million. Superman comes in at $3.3 million. Nobody 2 comes in at $2.4 million. And The Naked Gun comes in at $2.3 million. Opening outside of the top 10 was The Toxic Avenger, which brought in $1.7 million in over 1,000 theaters. Its per theater average was about $869, and if the average ticket price is actually at the reported $16, then that would be about 54 tickets sold per theater over the weekend for The Toxic Avenger. I think that some of the more crowded screenings in the bigger cities gave way to much less attended screenings in other cities. I enjoyed The Toxic Avenger. I really do applaud Cineverse for giving it a wide release, but unfortunately not a big draw over Labor Day weekend. Dropping out of the top 10 this past week, we had Jurassic World Rebirth, which is out after 8 weeks. K-Pop Demon Hunters, the sing-along version, was only in theaters for 1 week, so of course it's out of the top 10. And then we have Honey Don't, which is also out of the top 10 after 1 week. And looking at the biggest theater count changes over Labor Day weekend, Lilo & Stitch actually had the biggest change. It was put into an additional 2,385 theaters, bringing its total up to 2,440. This is pretty nakedly an attempt from Disney to have Lilo & Stitch make enough to unseat a Minecraft movie as the #1 grossing film of the year domestically. And as we'll see in a little bit, it looks like it might work. Nudja 2 lost a huge chunk of theaters, 1,472 of them. We talked last week on the show about the fact that it was just not a draw. It remained in just 756 theaters. The Naked Gun lost 1,032 theaters. It's still in 1,744. How to Train Your Dragon had that re-expansion the weekend ahead of Labor Day, so it lost most of those theaters, 961 of them. And Nobody 2 shed a pretty big chunk of theaters, 780 of them. It's still in 2,502. This is our poorly named road to recovery. The blue line is the weekend box office average from 2015 to 2019. The red line is the box office average from 2021 to 2024. And the dotted black line is every weekend this year. And you can see that we were below even the post-pandemic average for this Labor Day weekend. It's not usually a big draw at the theaters. A lot of people are outside. They're wrapping up their summers. But even by the admittedly very low standards of a post-2020 Labor Day weekend, this was still pretty low. And we'll talk about the summer box office and the pattern that we saw of just losing steam as time went on. Looking at the top per theater averages for the Labor Day weekend, at #1 was Love, Brooklyn, which debuted at the Sundance Film Festival. It made $49,243 in just one theater. I'm going to guess that theater was probably in New York, and that is actually one of the 5 best per theater averages of the year so far. It comes in ahead of Secret Mall Apartment and behind the very limited debut of Friendship, which opened in 6 theaters. The Phoenician Scheme still has the best per theater average of the year, with its 6th theater opening back in May, bringing in $93,417 per theater. In second place was Splitsville, which expanded to 28 theaters and brought in $6,253 per theater. Lurker in 19 theaters brought in $5,954 per theater. I actually really wanted to see it. It was playing in Los Angeles while I was there last weekend, but the scheduling just didn't work out, so I've got to hope that Mubi is able to get it booked into a theater near me at some point. Pools comes in 4th place at $4,348 per theater in 3 theaters, and Weapons rounds out the top 5 at just over $3,000 in just over 3,000 theaters. These were the top films in limited release, which I define as 1,000 theaters or fewer. At #1 is the IMAX re-release of Prince, Sign of the Times, which was in 377 IMAX theaters and brought in a reported $1.7 million. Splitsville comes in second place at $175,000. Ron Howard's film Eden comes in third at $140,000. Lurker comes in fourth at $113,000. And in fifth place, we have, playing in 70 theaters, A Little Prayer, which is another Sundance film, which is just entering the theatrical marketplace. It brought in just over $70,000. Looking outside the domestic marketplace to the top 5 films internationally, meaning every market except for the US and Canada, The Shadow's Edge, which is a Hong Kong action film, remains very popular. It brought in $26.7 million, a 3.9% increase from the weekend before. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle continues to do well as it rolls out around the world. It brought in $20.3 million, which was a 37.3% drop from the previous weekend. The Chinese animated film Nobody comes in third place with $15 million, followed by The Bad Guys 2 as it continues to roll out around the world. It was a 4.9% increase from the previous weekend and a $12.5 million weekend. And then Weapons continues to hold well internationally as well as domestically, Finally, it rounds out the top 5 with $9.4 million. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with the domestic numbers, we get our top 5 films worldwide. And The Shadow's Edge remains the number 1 film in the world at $26.7 million, just over $107.9 million total. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle is in second place. It's made $257.8 million worldwide, and it's looking to have an impressive debut here in the United States next week. Weapons is in third place with another $19.6 million, followed by The Bad Guys 2, and The Roses rounding out the top 5 at $15.55 million. Well, as I mentioned, Labor Day weekend is not traditionally a big movie-going weekend. As a matter of fact, when we look at this week's Charts with Dan trivia question, only 9 films have ever grossed more than $20 million over Labor Day weekend. The question this week is, how many of those movies can you name? So 9 movies. They didn't necessarily have to open on Labor Day weekend. They just had to have made over $20 million. So think about it. Pause the video if you need a couple more seconds, because here come the answers. The 9 movies are Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings back in 2021. That was an opening weekend and the highest opening weekend ever recorded for a film on Labor Day. The Equalizer 3, which also opened on Labor Day weekend. 2007's Halloween, which was a Labor Day opener. Then we had The Sixth Sense in 1999. Crazy Rich Asians in 2018, and Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014. All of those movies were continuing their successful box office runs. Then we have The Possession, which opened in 2012, The Butler in 2013, which was a continuation of its run, and Transporter 2, which opened over Labor Day weekend in 2005. So let's talk about the summer box office. Overall, it fell short of many expectations. People were hoping that we could maybe crack $4 billion. It came in closer to $3.3 billion. That's about 10% off from last summer, which itself was off 10% from the previous summer. And a big reason why is that it just lost steam as we went on. These are the monthly box office totals for summer 2024 in blue, and this summer, summer 2025 in yellow. And you can see we started out great. May's box office was about $400 million higher than what we saw in 2024. Sinners carried over into May. We had Lilo and Stitch in May. Final Destination Bloodlines, Mission Impossible opened in May. How to Train Your Dragon opened in May. But that was the last month where summer 2025 outgrossed summer 2024. June had about a $130 million drop between 2024 and 2025. July was close to even, but we were still about $65 million lower in 2025. And then August was much slower than what we saw last summer. Over $200 million difference between August 2024 and August 2025. And as we've been saying all summer, a big reason why is that there were very few mega hits. When you look at last summer, the top 5 films of summer 2024 made up about 57% of the total summer box office. This year, the top 5 films only made up about 50% of the total summer box office. So we had individual hits, we had specific movies that did well, but we didn't have as many breakout hits as we've seen in previous summers, and that helped to keep the overall summer box office totals low. When we look at 2025 as a whole, through the month of August, we are at $5.889 billion, which is about $261 million ahead of where we were last year at the same time, but that's down from a lead of about $477 million. That's where we were at the end of July, so we lost a lot of ground between the end of July and the end of August, and honestly, I would not be surprised if we lost even more ground in September, because we don't have, it would appear, a mega hit like Beetlejuice, which really helped to bolster the September box office last year. And if nothing really makes up that gap, we could find ourselves falling behind the pace for last year by the end of September. We're just going to have to see how that pans out. Looking at the overall theatrical market share through the end of August, with box office right around $5.9 billion, we didn't see much change from the end of July to the end of August. Disney picked up about 0.5 percentage point in market share. Warner Brothers picked up about 0.2 percentage points. Universal and Paramount essentially even from where they were a month ago. Sony lost less than 1%. Lionsgate lost about 0.3%. Amazon, which isn't even on this pie chart because the slice is too small, lost about 0.3%, and the all others slice picked up about 0.1%. So really it was just more of the same. Disney and Warner Brothers kind of counterbalance their successful releases. They still easily make up more than half of the domestic box office so far this year, and everybody else just didn't really do much. So let's talk about individual movies that came out this summer and which ones I think were box office winners and box office losers. And we'll start with the box office winners, although I do have to tell you there were fewer outright winners and outright losers this summer, and a lot more movies that were in the middle. Still, there were several movies that stood ahead of the pack. First of all, this is an easy one. Lilo and Stitch is a box office winner for summer 2025. It had a budget of around $100 million. It made over $1 billion worldwide. It was the number one movie domestically and the number one movie internationally this summer. Ticket sales covered both its budget and its marketing expenses, and according to my calculations, it's profitable in the theatrical window, meaning ticket sales only, to the tune of about $275 million. So that's a big win for Lilo and Stitch, although Disney had losses elsewhere that might have offset that profitability somewhat. Weapons, also a big box office winner in 2025, a budget of $38 million, worldwide gross right now at $235 plus million. It is the lowest budgeted film in the domestic summer top 10. Internationally, it outgrossed Sinners, so it was really able to connect with an international audience. And I'm estimating that its theatrical profitability at least $50 million, $50 plus million. It still has some room to grow in the theatrical market. Jurassic World Rebirth was a box office winner. It had a $200 million budget, which is pretty hefty, but it grossed over $850 million worldwide. It made over $500 million internationally. It was the number 2 international film of the summer. Ticket sales, of course, as with Lilo and Stitch, covered both budget and marketing expenses, which is how I calculate profitability. And I'm estimating that it is also profitable by at least $50 plus million in the theatrical window, which means that digital sales and merchandising and product tie-ins, all of that stuff, that's just icing on the cake. So an easy winner there with Jurassic World Rebirth. Final Destination Bloodlines, I believe, is a summer box office winner. A $50 million budget, a $300 million worldwide gross, the highest grossing film in Final Destination franchise history. Also the first Final Destination film to gross $100 plus million domestically and the first to gross $200 plus million worldwide. I estimate theatrical profitability at least $36 million. And How to Train Your Dragon, I'm estimating to be a box office winner, largely because the budget was kept low at $150 million. It made $629 plus million worldwide. There's still some money trickling in. Of course, it's the first live action remake of a DreamWorks animation film, and I'm estimating theatrical profitability of at least $35 million for How to Train Your Dragon. We've talked about this so many times on the show. Breaking even or making money in the theatrical window is a great goal for any movie to have because it means that all of your expenses have been covered by ticket sales and all of the ancillaries just become pure profit for the studio. Finally, a smaller film that I have as a box office winner, Materialists. It had a budget reportedly of $20 million. It grossed $92.6 million worldwide. It's the third highest grossing film worldwide in A24 history. It's one of 4 A24 films to open to $10 plus million domestically. And I estimate that the movie will at least break even theatrically. So good for A24 and Celine Song there. Then we have movies in the middle, what I'm calling the in-betweeners, and many of these are closer to judgment calls. These are movies that may not necessarily have made money theatrically, but they're close to breaking even theatrically, or I believe that there is a clear road to profitability for them. And these are also movies that I think at least met expectations at the box office. So the movies I have on this list are Bring Her Back, which was a low-budgeted horror film that I believe is going to be ultimately profitable, even if it didn't create the same amount of buzz as Talk to Me. 28 Years Later also did well. It didn't blow the doors off, but that's going to be a profitable film. I Know What You Did Last Summer did not have a particularly impressive box office run, but the budget was so low, my calculations had it close to break even given the fact that it didn't do great numerically. I mean, if you're just looking at the raw numbers, but the fact that it's close to theatrical profitability puts it on this list. Freakier Friday is really having a nice extended run in theaters. That movie is going to be profitable. And yes, I am putting Superman on this list because I believe it met expectations box office wise, and it is going to be a profitable film for Warner Brothers. I did a video last week about Man of Steel and Superman and breaking down things with calculations, etc., to see which one was more successful at the box office and adjusting for inflation and all that stuff. And based on much of the response to that video, many people were very complimentary. They at least thought it was interesting. But based on many of the responses, I guess what I'll say when I weigh in on this conversation about which movie's more successful, Superman or Man of Steel, I'll just tell you to pick whatever metric backs up what you already think and just go with that, because that seems to have been the strategy that a lot of people choose. So just do that. It's fine. F1 the movie. Now, most people might expect this to be on the box office winners list. The only reason I did not put it on there is because it had a very, very high cost of production that kept its theatrical profitability down. So I would say it is a winner in the sense that it had a very, very good performance domestically and internationally. The only thing that bumps it down a bit is the high cost of production. The Bad Guys 2 didn't do as well as I thought that it would, but it was not an expensive animated film to make, so I think that it will ultimately turn a profit, if not theatrically, very shortly thereafter. Same with Karate Kid Legends. Didn't have an amazing run, but low production cost is what keeps it on this side of the list. And really, you can say the same thing about The Naked Gun, which is a movie I liked a lot. Didn't have an overwhelming box office reception, but I think that it is ultimately going to be profitable. And finally, Together, which was a high cost of acquisition for Neon. Didn't have an amazing run, but I think it should healthily turn a profit. We've got so much more to get to today, but before we do, I want to thank my partner for this episode, HelloFresh. When I think about my favorite meals, a home-cooked meal's got to be right up there at the top. I remember growing up with my mom's home fries and cheese dip. It'd be great to have that all the time, but she lives like 3 hours away, so that wouldn't be very fair to her to drive back and forth all that time. So if I'm going to make a home-cooked meal, I'm going to do it myself. And if you like cooking at home, you should check out HelloFresh. HelloFresh sends out chef-crafted recipes and fresh ingredients right to your door. And this summer, they just made their biggest menu upgrade yet. That's right. This is not your grandmother's HelloFresh, unless your grandmother owns HelloFresh, in which case it is hers. HelloFresh has doubled their menu. So now you can choose from 100 options every week, including new seasonal dishes and recipes from around the world. If you want to eat healthier, HelloFresh has high protein and veggie-packed recipes. If you're a meat eater like me, you can now get steak and seafood recipes delivered every single week for no extra cost. That's right, surf and turf. And I'm not going to lie, I eat out quite a bit. But there's just something really satisfying about digging into a home-cooked meal, something that you make yourself. And with HelloFresh, you get delicious food, great ingredients. All of it is shipped right to your door. Sign me up. And I'm not just saying that. You can literally sign up right now. The best way to cook just got better. Go to HelloFresh.com/DanMurrell10FM. to get 10 free meals plus a free item for life, 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as a discount on the first box. New subscribers only, varies by plan. That's HelloFresh.com/DanMurrell10FM to get 10 free meals plus a free item for life. All right, now let's get to the box office losers of summer 2025. And as I said earlier, there aren't a whole lot of them. We didn't have as many catastrophic failures, certainly not the number that we saw in, I think it was summer 2023, when it seemed like almost every major film just had a horrible box office performance. But there are 2 films that I think you can healthily say definitely lost the most money. Really, I think the biggest box office loser of this summer is Elio, which had a budget of $250+ million and grossed only $152 million worldwide. Other than Onward, Elio is the only theatrically released Pixar film to gross less than $100 million domestically and less than $200 million worldwide. And of course, Onward had massive extenuating circumstances for why its gross was so low. I'm estimating the theatrical loss for Elio at $250+ million. I think it is highly doubtful that that movie ever becomes profitable, even with ancillary revenue. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, this was a high production cost thing. It grossed right now close to $600 million worldwide, but the reported budget was $400 million, and that's before you add marketing costs, which really just offsets that worldwide gross. And I'm estimating theatrical losses at $290+ million just because it was such a massively expensive film. If they made it for half as much, then it would have been in a much better position. Maybe not a box office winner, but certainly not the sort of theatrical loss that it appears like we're looking at with Mission Impossible. It will be interesting to see what the new Skydance regime does with the Mission Impossible franchise. A little bit of a lesser loser here, but I'm putting Thunderbolts on this list, and this is a movie that I enjoyed. It had a $180 million budget, which was just way too high for a movie like this. It brought in $382 million worldwide. It is one of 3 post-2020 MCU films to gross less than $200 million domestically and less than $400 million worldwide, along with Black Widow and the Marvels. I'm estimating a theatrical loss of around $100 million for Thunderbolts. Ballerina, I also put on this list mainly because it just was so much lower than the rest of the modern John Wick franchise, meaning absent the first film, which was kind of a sleeper hit, had a reported budget of around $90 million, only made $131 million worldwide. It had the second highest budget, but also the second lowest gross in the franchise, and earned $316 million less worldwide than John Wick Chapter 4, which was the previous film in the franchise. I'm estimating a theatrical loss of around $70+ million for Ballerina. Then we had Megan 2.0, certainly not the biggest loss theatrically of the summer. There are others that I didn't necessarily make a graphic for that lost more. But when you look at measuring up to expectation in the previous film, it had a budget of $25 million, a $39 million worldwide gross. It grossed $140 million less worldwide and $70 million less domestically than the first Megan film. It actually made less in its domestic run than the first movie made in its opening weekend. And I estimated a theatrical loss at $40+ million. Just not great news for Blumhouse there. And then these are the other in-betweeners. These are movies that I think are either going to be healthily unprofitable or that I think underperformed expectations. And honestly, the Fantastic Four First Steps, I debated where to put it. It is the in-betweener of in-betweeners, but I don't think that it performed up to expectation in the way that Superman did. They're kind of similar movies, but I think that The Fantastic Four was just a much more disappointing film in its result. So it goes on this list, but it is not a massive failure. It's just, I think, a disappointment. Smurfs really just didn't do well at all. I don't know if many people expected it to, but it used to have kind of a base internationally. It didn't even have that. Eddington, which was a big budget film for Ari Aster, just completely failed to deliver at the box office. Hurry Up Tomorrow, which was a very buzzy film. You had Jenna Ortega, you had The Weeknd involved. Nobody cared about that movie when it came out. Honey Don't, which kind of extends a losing streak with Drive-Away Dolls and other movies that nobody really seemed to care about from the same filmmakers. The Phoenician Scheme, not an outright flop because it didn't have a huge budget, but again, with Wes Anderson, with the cast involved, I think that there was some expectation that it would do better. It didn't do better. And then we have Nobody 2, which really struggled to match the performance of the first film, which was one of the first movies to hit theaters back when they reopened. So to be this far down the road in a market that certainly recovered from where it was when the first film came out, for Nobody 2 to really show no growth, I think that that is clearly a disappointing result. And of course, there are some movies that are not on this list because I didn't feel like they fit squarely into either category, or because they're newer films that we just don't know enough about. But yeah, I mean, this really was the summer of the in-betweeners, the movies that weren't huge hits, maybe not huge failures, but it contributed to ultimately a disappointing box office overall, and we'll see what happens in the fall. This is the summer box office chart for 2025. Now, there may be some movies that change positions. For example, Weapons is close to overtaking Final Destination Bloodlines for number 9 on the list, and F1 the movie is close to overtaking Thunderbolts for number 7, but these are the 10 final movies in the domestic top 10, with, of course, Lilo and Stitch at number 1, followed by Superman, Jurassic World Rebirth, The Fantastic Four First Steps, which has moved up to number 4 since the last show, How to Train Your Dragon at number 5, Mission Impossible at number 6, Thunderbolts at number 7, F1 at number 8 right now, Final Destination Bloodlines at number 9 right now, and Weapons at number 10. And let's look at that compared to my predictions. I got number 1 right. I predicted that Lilo and Stitch would be the number 1 movie of the summer, and it was the number 1 movie of the summer. summer. I pretty heavily overestimated How to Train Your Dragon. I thought it was going to be the number 2 film of the summer. It is down there at number 5. Superman, I'm pretty happy with. I thought that it would be number 3. It's number 2 for the summer. The Fantastic Four, First Steps, it appears I was able to get in the right spot at number 4. So really my strategy of picking the movie where it seemed most fitting to pick the movie worked out. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, I picked to be the number 5 movie of the summer. It's at number 6. So, not so bad. Jurassic World Rebirth, I would say that was probably my worst pick. I picked it to be number 6 for the summer. It's at number 3. So where I overestimated How to Train Your Dragon, I underestimated Jurassic World Rebirth. F1 the Movie and Thunderbolts may actually switch positions, and if they do, that means I'll have predicted both of those movies in the correct spot, so I'm happy with my choice there. And then I predicted Elio and The Bad Guys 2 to be the number 9 and number 10 movies of the summer. Neither of them made the list, but if I'm gonna lose 2 picks, I'd rather it be the number 9 and number 10 spot and not like number 2 and number 5. Final Destination Bloodlines and Weapons at number 9 and 10. And it really reinforces something. When I was prepping my list this year, I was looking at past results and I thought, well, there's always an R-rated film that gets in there, and usually kind of like a horror movie that gets in there. So maybe I should pick Final Destination or take a flyer on Weapons. But the family films seemed like such safer picks, even though I was picking against what often happens at the box office. So that's just a lesson for me. I need to stop looking at family films as being quite so safe, and I need to start putting at least, I think, one more R-rated film every year in my top 10, because there are always 1 or 2 at least that bleed through, and that's certainly what we saw in the summer of 2025. Looking at my accuracy as a summer box office predictor, believe it or not, I now have 10 years of box office predictions for the summer under my belt, and I am at 8 out of 10. I got 8 out of 10 last year. I got 8 out of 10 in 2023, and I got 8 out of 10 in 2021. I aced it in 2022, which I actually think I forgot on a previous show, but 8 out of 10 seems to kind of be my sweet spot. So overall, over 10 years, I've correctly predicted 81 out of 100 top 10 summer movies for an 81% accuracy rate. Let's see if I can do better in 2026. And now that we are saying goodbye to the summer box office, that brings us to this week's member poll question. And that question is, what movie are you most looking forward to for the rest of 2025, September through the end of the year? Any movie that's coming out is fair game. Leave your pick in the comments of the member poll. And because there are going to be so many answers probably to this question, if you see your answer there, please upvote that instead of leaving it as a separate comment. It helps me to tabulate the results. The 5 picks with the most upvotes will be revealed here on the show next week. And we had a very close member poll last week. I asked what Netflix original movie you wish you could have seen in theaters, similar to how K-Pop Demon Hunters got a theatrical release. And the number 1 movie by 1 vote was Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio with 16 votes. I've got a cosign there. That would have been great to see in theaters. Glass Onion, strangely, is in second place with 15 votes. It did get a theatrical release, but a lot of people said that it was not playing near them because it was only in about 700 theaters. Reportedly, Wake Up Dead Man is going to have a similar release. So even though Glass Onion did get the widest release of all these movies, it's number 2 on this poll. The holiday film Claws comes in third place with 14 votes. Then we have Extraction 2 at 13 votes and All Quiet on the Western Front at number 5 with 10 votes. So a very close poll. And if you want to vote in this week's member poll, if you're not a member of the channel yet, you can find out how to do that in the description below, or depending on how you're watching the video, there might be a button for you to click so that you can easily become a member. And you don't just get to vote in the member poll on Charts with Dan every week. You also get custom badges and emoji to use in the comments section, and you get exclusive early access to a lot of videos like this one, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours before other people on the channel get to see it. So I'd love to have you become a member. I'd love to hear your voice. And as you can see from this past week, sometimes your vote can make the difference. All right, let's take a look at the 2025 domestic box office so far. A Minecraft movie is at number 1 at $423.9 million. It looked like Lilo and Stitch was going to come up short, but Disney re-expanded the movie. They are trying to shake every quarter out of the couch cushion that is the summer box office. And it looks like it might work because Lilo and Stitch is now less than $600,000 behind a Minecraft movie for the number 1 movie domestically of the year. I feel like Disney might be sending a lot of employees to the movies this upcoming week because what was a close competition is now much, much closer. So we'll see if Lilo and Stitch can get over the finish line. Superman is in third place for the year so far, followed by Jurassic World Rebirth and Sinners. The Fantastic Four First Steps moves up one spot to number 6. How to Train Your Dragon is at number 7. Captain America Brave New World is at number 8. Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning is at number 9. Thunderbolts is at number 10, but F1 the movie is right there lurking at number 11, threatening to break into the domestic top 10. So we'll see if it's able to do that. This is the 2025 worldwide box office. Of course, Ne Zha 2 at number 1 at $2.2 billion. Lilo and Stitch, still the only Hollywood film to cross $1 billion so far this year. A Minecraft movie in third. Jurassic World Rebirth in fourth. How to Train Your Dragon in fifth. F1 the movie actually moved past Superman over the Labor Day weekend worldwide to be the number 6 movie at $613.8 million. That bumps Superman down to number 7 at $611.5 million. Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning is at number 8. Detective Chinatown 1900 is at number 9. And the Fantastic Four First Steps has crossed that $500 million mark there at number 10. So that is my extensive breakdown of what happened at the box office this summer, but there's a summer hit that is still on fire over at Netflix. We're talking about the movie that was number 1 at the box office on last week's show, and it is still the most watched program on Netflix, and that is K-Pop Demon Hunters. Now, these are not the latest numbers. There were other numbers that came out yesterday, but I didn't want to cover 2 weeks worth of numbers. We have so much on this show already, so I will recap the latest numbers that came out yesterday on next week's show. These are the numbers for August 18th through the 24th. K-Pop Demon Hunters was the most watched program on Netflix at 25.43 million views. Spoiler alert, I can tell you that for the next batch of numbers, K-Pop Demon Hunters was still number 1, and its views increased to 30 million views, probably spurred on by the sing-along version that was added to Netflix. So the viewership for K-Pop Demon Hunters is going to grow on next week's show when we look at the Netflix ratings. In second place is the Netflix film Fall For Me, which is a German film about a woman who falls in love with a man with a dark secret, at 16.46 million views. Then we have Wednesday Season 2. The second half of that season is going to drop on Netflix today, actually, on Wednesday. So Wednesday Season 2 with 13.39 million views. Night Always Comes is at number 4. The Netflix original series Hostage debuts at number 5 at 10.77 million views. Then we have Fit for TV at number 6. At number 7 is Abandoned Man, a Turkish film about a man rediscovering life after prison, with 7.7 million views. Then we have Welcome to Sudden Death, which is not a Netflix original film. It's actually from 2020. Michael Jai White plays an arena security guard protecting fans from terrorists. People were interested in watching it, though. 6.15 million views. My Oxford Years at number 9, and Home rounds out the top 10. And when we look at the most watched programs on Netflix in 2025, of course, K-Pop Demon Hunters really just running up the score at 235.99 million views. As we sit here today, it's up to about 265 million views. Back in Action in second place, followed by Adolescence in third. Squid Game Season 3 in fourth. Squid Game Season 2 in fifth. Happy Gilmore 2 moves up one spot to number 6. Straw moves down to number 7. The Life List moves down to number 8. Exterritorials at number 9. Now, Wednesday Season 2 cracks the top 10 at number 10 this week. Now, we're going to see a dip in views most likely next week, because there will be an increase in runtime, which is sort of dilute those hours watched for Wednesday Season 2. So it may dip back off the top 10, but of course, I'll keep tracking it to see if it does reemerge as a top 10 Netflix program for 2025. And this is interesting. Now, you may have seen headlines saying that K-Pop Demon Hunters is the most viewed film in Netflix history. That is true, as Obi-Wan Kenobi would say, from a certain point of view. It is the most watched film in its first 90 days in Netflix history. When you look at all ratings data that Netflix has made available, though, since 2021, which is not just the first 90 days, but all viewership, I have K-Pop Demon Hunters at number 4 with 235.99 million views. When you add in the latest batch of numbers, that'll put it up at number 3 behind only The Boss Baby and then Red Notice. Red Notice, according to all provided Netflix ratings data, and they release a big batch that shows you all of the hours watched, is the most watched Netflix film since they've been reporting data at 371.53 million views. K-Pop Demon Hunters is going to eclipse that at some point. Whether or not that's going to be while it's on the chart or when there's additional data provided later, I don't know. But it is rapidly moving up this chart. It bumps The Gray Man, Extraction 2, and The Mother all down a spot. And when we look at the most viewed Netflix programs, again, based on all available ratings reports from Netflix, not just the weeks that movies are in the top 10, but every 6 months, they give you everything, all of the hours watched. I have K-Pop Demon Hunters as the 6th most watched Netflix program since 2021 at 235.99 million views. Again, based on the latest data, it will be in the top 5 on next week's show, behind The Boss Baby, Wednesday Season 1, Squid Game Season 1, and Red Notice. Wednesday Season 1 also is probably moving up this list. I didn't want to update it in real time because I don't know how much Squid Game Season 1 is being watched and whether that's enough to outpace the renewed interest in Wednesday Season 1. But when we get to the end of the year and we have that next batch for the latter half of 2025, all the ratings data, I think it's going to be very telling because there are going to be some big movers and shakers on this list. Let's take a look at the latest numbers from Nielsen. Now, these numbers are delayed by about a month and they're domestic only. They're not worldwide like the ones we just saw from Netflix. This is for the week of July 8th through August 3rd, and the number one movie was Happy Gilmore 2. This would be its second week of availability. Still a huge number, 33.15 million hours watched. K-Pop Demon Hunters, which is really just entering the heart of its run on Netflix a month ago, is at 18.3 million hours watched, followed by Hotel Transylvania at number 3. My Oxford Year debuts on the chart at number 4, followed by War of the Worlds on Amazon Prime Video. All of the buzz, including here on this channel, about how terrible the movie is, spurred it to a top 5 finish here on the most watched streaming movies. Remember, when you're watching something on streaming, there are no ironic viewing minutes. So those hours watched for War of the Worlds count, whether it's a terrible movie or a great one. Happy Gilmore is at number 6. Final Destination Bloodlines debuts on the chart at number 7 on HBO Max with 5.15 million hours watched, followed by Freelance, which I believe is an older John Cena film, at number 8. Death of a Unicorn debuting on HBO Max at number 9, and Medea's Destination Wedding rounding out the top 10. And when we look at the top streaming movie performances of the year, according to Nielsen in the United States, of course, Happy Gilmore 2 had a massive opening week, the most watched movie ever in the history of Nielsen charts, at least on a weekly basis. And Happy Gilmore 2 had the third best performance of 2025 for a film at 33.15 million hours watched. It comes in just behind the debut of Moana 2 on Disney Plus and ahead of the first 2 weeks of Back in Action, which was also a Netflix original film. These were the most watched streaming shows for July 28th through August 3rd. At number 1 is The Hunting Wives, which has really been coming on strong with these Nielsen numbers at 26.3 million hours watched, followed by Untamed at number 2, Bluey at number 3. At number 4 is Hightown, which is a crime series that originally aired on Starz. It brought in 12.5 million hours watched on Netflix. Then we have Grey's Anatomy, Animal Kingdom, Blind Spot, Leanne, which is another show that's on Netflix. Features Leanne Morgan playing a woman who starts over later in life. Family Guy on Hulu returns to the chart at number 9, and then South Park, in the middle of its buzzy new season, rounds out the top 10. And these were the top 20 streaming shows when you look at watch time per available episode. So you take the total number of hours watched, divide them by the number of episodes you can watch. That gives us this number. The Hunting Wives is number 1 here too at 3.29 million hours watched per episode. Then we have Trainwreck Storm Area 51 at 3.21 million hours watched per episode. Untamed is above 2 million at 2.42 million hours watched per episode. Then we have Ballard, which has really been a fixture in this top 10 over the last few weeks, followed by Leanne at number 5. The Summer I Turned Pretty, as it rolls out its new season, is at number 6 with over 500,000 hours watched per episode. Hightown is at number 7. The Conclusion of the Sandman on Netflix comes in at number 8 at 390,000 hours watched per episode. Then we have The Weird World of Gumball at number 9 and Star Trek Strange New Worlds rounding out the top 10. And that's what I've got for you this week. Before we go, though, I wanted to flag a few things that you might be interested in watching, both at home and in theaters. First of all, yesterday, a couple of summer movies were made available for digital sale and for premium video on demand. The Naked Gun, you can now watch at home, as well as Nobody 2, now available for home viewing. Of course, today, as I mentioned, part 2 of Wednesday's second season is debuting on Netflix. Beavis and Butthead Season 3 debuts today on Comedy Central. Lilo and Stitch is now now available on Disney Plus, and the Jason Statham film A Working Man is now streaming on Amazon Prime Video. Tomorrow, the entire first season of The Office spinoff, The Paper, will be dropping on Peacock. I'm very curious about this show. I'm going to try to check it out, maybe do a video if I think that it's interesting enough to talk about. Then on Friday, sort of the first major post-summer release, we have The Conjuring Last Rites, allegedly the last film in the Conjuring series, although I don't believe it for a second. You can check that out, or if you're a Hamilton fan, this movie was originally supposed to come out in theaters back in 2020. It got the Disney Plus release instead, but the version of Hamilton that's been streaming on Disney Plus will now be in theaters to celebrate, I believe, the musical's 10th anniversary. So if you want to catch that in theaters, I don't think they're doing a sing-along version like they did with K-Pop Demon Hunters, but it will be in theaters. In limited release is a movie called Twinless, which debuted at the Sundance Film Festival. I was really anxious to see it, and it was available for critics to screen, but then some morons decided they were going to screen capture scenes from the film and post them to social media for clout. So it got pulled from the online portal. I'm hoping to see the film as soon as I can. I believe it won the Audience Award at Sundance. A lot of really good buzz around that one. Also in limited release this upcoming weekend is The Baltimoreans, which is the latest film from director Jay Duplass. And this is the best time of the year. Fall is coming when the new season of The Great British Baking Show, aka The Great British Bake Off over in the UK, makes its debut on Netflix. I can't wait. This is appointment viewing for me every single week. It's just delightful. If you missed Friendship in theaters this summer, it's debuting on HBO Max this Friday, and I'm excited to see this one because it did not play in a theater near me. Spike Lee's latest film starring Denzel Washington, Highest to Lowest, debuts this weekend on Friday on Apple TV+. Then on Sunday, if you want to feel old, The Breakfast Club 40th Anniversary re-release will be hitting theaters Sunday. If you can't catch it on Sunday, it will also be available on Wednesday. And debuting on AMC this Sunday is the third season of The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon. I've never seen one episode of the show, but apparently someone's watching it because it's on season 3. And that's all I've got for you this week. I know this was a big download of information, but there's even more that I'm cooking up for the rest of the week. I'm going to try to do my live show later today after taking the week off last week while I was traveling. And there's so many interesting things that are releasing on streaming and theaters. I am planning on doing 2 or 3 more reviews throughout the week, so be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you know when I upload a new video. But most importantly, thank you for watching this video. Thank you to HelloFresh for partnering up with me on this video. You can find more about them in the description below. And as always, until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.